Okay. So welcome all of you to the second day of the Institute Seminar Days series. So we'll have two talks today. Manjari is our first speaker, talking about neutron stars as tools to probe gravitational physics. And we have the next talk at 4:30 from Brigendra. So over to Manjari.
Okay, great. Thanks, Shushmita. So, thanks all organizers of the seminar day. It's organizers, and I'm Manjari. I work on neutron stars, which are nature's excellent tools to test various aspects of gravitational physics. Some of which, only two aspects I am going to tell you today. But as I am here, if you are interested, I can tell more again and again. So what are these neutron stars? Basically, they are dead star, means there are no more nuclear fusion inside them, and they are composed of mostly free neutrons. There are no more atoms or molecules, and some models expect that there might be a few protons or perhaps exotic baryons like lambda baryon, chi baryon, but we don't know those things very well even now. One important thing is that these neutron stars are extremely dense. They can be 1.5 to 2 times heavier than our sun, and diameter only about 20 kilometers. So here you see the where I point that 1.988 into 10 to the power 34 kg. This is the mass of our sun. So neutron stars are heavier than our sun, but diameter is only about 20 kilometer. And if you want an idea what is 20 kilometer, I just checked in the Google map that IMSC to CMI distance is 22 kilometer. So you can easily calculate the density of such neutron stars. And because they are so dense that their gravitational field is very strong. So gravitational phenomena near neutron stars cannot be explained with Newtonian gravity. You need Einstein's general theory of relativity. But extreme density and strong gravity are not the only thing. There are other interesting features. One is very high magnetic field. Magnetic fields of known neutron stars in the range of 10 to the power 9 to 15 Gauss. And if you want to know what this means, I would like to say Earth's magnetic field is less than a Gauss, and the fringe magnets we have, they are around 10 to the power 4 Gauss. Again, that is also not the end. These objects spin extremely fast. Spin period of known neutron stars are in the range of 1.4 millisecond to 12 second. And in comparison, you know, Earth's spin period is 1 day. That is the definition of a day, right? And because of last two features, means high magnetic field and high spin period, although neutron stars are dead star, there is no more nuclear fusion, they still emit electromagnetic waves. So more accurately, we should call them undead star instead of calling them dead star. And how they emit, there are many physical effect through which they emit electromagnetic waves, but the most dominant is their rotating magnetic field. I just said that they are very strong magnet. So we have all studied in our MSc electrodynamics that a rotating electric dipole or magnetic dipole emits electromagnetic beam. So in the same picture, means there is a rotating magnet. So there is electromagnetic beam being emitted from north and south pole of the magnet along the magnetic axis. And this is very much beamed, like almost like our laser pointer. So when the magnetic axis is spinning around a spin axis, this beam, like a torchlight, is also rotating. And while rotating, means if it falls onto Earth once in its rotation, we can see it. But as it is rotating, it just momentarily moves away. Then after one rotation, it can fall onto Earth again, and we can see it again. And once in each rotation, we see it. So for us, it looks like they are pulsating. We call them pulsar. And sometimes we call them radio pulsars. It does not mean that these neutron stars or pulsars, they emit only in radio wavelength. They emit in throughout the electromagnetic spectrum. But we know gamma ray, X-ray, those are blocked by our atmosphere. So to see or detect those electromagnetic waves from pulsars, we need to put our detectors on satellites. And when you put on satellites, you cannot make your detectors as big as you want, right? Because satellites have some limit how much weight they can carry. But radio wavelength can come to our ground, so we can make as big as a radio telescope we want, and that is why we can study pulsars based in radio wavelength, and we sometimes we simply call them radio pulsar. Here are pictures of few of my most favorite telescopes. I will only mention about GMRT, this at the bottom left corner. It is actually an array of telescopes. There are total 30 radio telescopes, each of 45-meter diameter. And together, you can use as a very sensitive, very big telescope. And I use GMRT very often. It is located a little bit north of Pune. And the first radio pulsar was discovered in 1967 by a PhD student named Jocelyn Bell. I don't know how many PhD students are attending today's talk, so you people should feel inspired. And today we know total 2,800 radio pulsars. Most of them are isolated. There are 2 3-body systems, and around 300 are binary system, means where you have a neutron star or the pulsar and another object gravitationally bound and orbiting around the common center of mass. And what is that other object? It can be anything. It can be a planet, it can be a low mass substellar object, it can be a sun-like main sequence star, it can be a white dwarf, means like another type of undead star, it can be another neutron star, and in principle it can be a black hole also, although unfortunately so far no such neutron star black hole binary has been detected, but that is just the statistical phenomena, because to have a neutron star black hole binary you need progenitors of both the stars to be very massive. There are not many such systems, so there are very few neutron star black hole binaries in our galaxies, but they are there. So if we keep on searching for new pulsars, it is just a matter of time. One day we'll soon discover a neutron star black hole binary, and that will be very useful to test some of the alternative theories of gravity, which I will tell you very soon. But to do that, means to do any kind of test of gravity theories, or what do you do? Means I said that when the electromagnetic wave falls on Earth, then what do? We do a kind of study which is called timing analysis. See, when this electromagnetic beam falls on Earth, what we do, we record the time when it reaches our telescope. So then 1 pulse, 2 pulse, we record 100 such arrival times. Then we predict when the next 100 pulses should arrive on Earth. And then we keep on observing, means we have prediction for next 100 pulses, and we observe when those next 100 pulses really observing. When there is a good agreement, we call our model, which we call timing model, is good. And this timing model has its input as many, like actually masses of the pulsar and the companion, and many orbital parameter, some of which contains general relativistic effect, that I will tell you. But first, please remember a term residual, because that term I will use again and again. This residual is the difference between measured arrival times of pulses and predicted arrival times of pulses. And I said to predict these arrival times, we have a model which has many parameters. What are those parameters? First, spin period of the pulsar, spin period derivative, location of the pulsar in the sky, because for different direction it will take different it's a time for the pulse to come from, reach us from the pulsar to Earth. Then motions of the pulses in the sky, no astrophysical object is still. And then as I said, I am interested in binary pulsar. There would be Keplerian orbital parameter like orbital period, eccentricity, semi-major axis, orientation of the orbit, etc. And what about those are all manifestation of Newtonian mechanics, but what about the observational manifestation of general relativity? Those comes through 5 post-Keplerian parameter. So what are these? First is precision of the orbit in its plane. Second is rate of change of orbital period or decay of orbital period. We all know when two objects moves around common center of mass, they emit gravitational waves. And like any other waves, gravitational waves also carry energy. And that energy comes at the cost of binding energy of the orbit. So because of emission of gravitational waves, orbit shrinks. Sorry. Orbit shrinks and orbital period changes. Orbital period changes, and that is what we call rate of change of orbital period or the decay of orbital period. And here I would like to mention that when the first binary pulsar was discovered in 1975, and the observers saw this rate of change of orbital period, and they found that the measurement of this decay of orbital period matches exactly what the general theory of relativity predicts if that decay is due to quadrupolar gravitational wave emission. So that detection we call as first indirect detection of gravitational wave. And other post-Keplerian parameters, one is Shapiro delay, which is actually the effect of extra space-time curvature near the companion of the binary. And the last is Einstein delay, which is just conversion from the time in pulsar frame to time in on Earth frame. But now, as I said, that we can do test theories of gravity with neutron star black hole binaries, and I also told you that there is no such binaries known yet, but there are lots of theoretical papers who studied binary evolution very well. In particular, I like this paper number 6, who did a very thorough study and predicted what should be the orbital period, eccentricity, semi-major axis of all these binaries and masses of the black holes. And once I used this result, and I also looked at one paper which had some analytical calculation under alternative theories of gravity. General theory of relativity, although it passed all experimentals so far, there is one interesting feature. It emits only, it allows only the emission of quadrupolar gravitational waves, but there are different theories of gravity, like scalar tensor theories. Those theories allows monopolar or dipolar gravitational waves. So if you are interested, and the different types of gravitational waves gives the analytical expression of decay of orbital period that varies. And those analytical expressions are given by this paper in 92. So few years ago, I worked on this aspect a little bit, and I found that if we can discover a neutron star black hole binary, this decay of orbital period due to dipolar gravitational wave will be significantly large, and it will be easier to detect. And if you can detect dipolar gravitational waves, or you cannot detect, it will help you to rule out or establish those alternative theories of gravity which allows such dipolar gravitational wave. But to do it, means whether this gravitational wave is dipolar or quadrupolar, to do this you first need to measure the decay of orbital period, right? And it is decay. As I said, that orbit is losing energy in the form of gravitational energy. So orbit shrinks and orbital period decreases with time. So this should be a negative quantity, but when we do timing analysis, sometimes we see this measurement is positive. Means here you see these two, like whenever you see this name like J1730 plus 0747, those are names of pulsars by coordinate. You see the value of rate of change of orbital period is positive. On the other hand, the rate of change of spin period should be always positive. Means pulsars lose their rotational kinetic energy in the form of electromagnetic energy. Pulsars slow down, so time increases, spin period increases. So those P dot S, the rate of change of spin period should be positive, but sometimes we find those are negative. So again, there is something wrong. So my student Dhruv, who is a final year PhD student here, he is working on this effect. And 2 years ago, he has established that this anomaly can be explained as a dynamical effects. So I'm not going to talk much about that, but just a brief summary that pulsars suffer acceleration due to variation of gravitational potential in the Milky Way, in which all those pulsars are located. And due to that, there is a apparent anomaly. But if you know the model of the gravitational potential of the galaxy very well, you can correct. And actually, just recently, he worked not on the first derivative. Observationally, we can measure second derivative of periods also, and that also become contaminated by the gravitational potential. And this paper, Dhruv's paper, was accepted just 2 days ago. I'm hoping he will give a talk, so let us see. But today, the rest of part of my talk, I will talk only about one experiment about which I am very much excited, and almost all of my research time over last 4 5 years I am spending on this experiment. This is pulsar timing array experiment. We all know about LIGO and all those gravitational wave discoveries by LIGO, but I would like to tell you what LIGO have discovered, or it can even discover in future, is only the tip of the iceberg, because LIGO can discover only very high frequency gravitational waves, but gravitational waves are there in very broad frequency. So like LISA, space-based laser interferometer, it can detect mid-frequency gravitational waves, but there is very low frequency gravitational waves in the frequency nanohertz, which cannot be detected by instruments. You need very big instruments. So there is a method where we are going to use pulsars as our instruments. Means here we are not trying to detect gravitational waves being emitted from the pulsars. We are using pulsars as tools to detect gravitational waves coming from far behind, say merger of supermassive galaxies, etc. And here, actually, what do you know? I said we do timing analysis and we measure residuals very well. Means you have a good timing model, your predicted pulse arrival times and observed pulse arrival times agree very well. But if you suddenly see one pulsar is behaving very strangely, you can say, okay, there might be something else, like earthquake, there might be starquake. But say you are observing 60 pulsar. If suddenly you see something is wrong, their timing solutions are behaving very strangely, so that means something else is there. So the one aspect is that if gravitational waves coming from behind, they can lead to a difference in such timing solution, and we know how they should behave. Means say, please look at the right hand side plot, where along x-axis I plot angular separation between various pulses in the sky, and y-axis is the difference or correlation between the timing solution, goodness of timing solution or residual. That depends on angular separation between pulsars if this anomaly is due to gravitational wave. So this curve is called the Hellings and Downs curve, and it is obvious if we want to say very confidently that, well, what we are seeing is due to gravitational wave emission, we need the full this curve. And for that, we need a number of pulsars with various the angular separation between them. So that is why this experiment is called pulsar timing array, because you need a number of pulsars or an array of pulsars. And who are we? Who are we doing this experiment? There are three established group doing this experiment for last 15 years. One is the Australian group, second is the European group, third is the North American group, and they are doing their experiments independently using the radio telescopes they have, and time to time, once in every 5 or 6 years, they combine their data and see whether they are detecting gravitational waves. Still now they have not detected, but probably within next 5 6 years this experiment will succeed. And because of that, we call this joint effort International Pulsar Timing Array. And for last few years, some of us, we Indian pulsar astronomers, we formed a group and we started to do this experiment using GMRT radio telescopes, which I showed you already. And here is our group. It is a small group because you see these are the different continents, and here we are a small country working on that. We have a few students, few postdocs, and few senior astronomers. And you can see IMSc student Dhruv and IMSc postdoc Arpita, and here I am. People are in from various places: NCRA, TIFR, IIT Hyderabad. And one thing I would like to say, all this in the first row, you see various PhD students. They are doing awesome work because you have realized the nature of this experiment is such that you cannot expect a paper before 4 or 5 years, and it cannot be a thesis work of a student. So all these students, they have their separate thesis work, but just out of love for gravitational wave astrophysics and pulsar astronomy, they are working very, very hard for this project. So they deserve a special clapping. And this is our result. X-axis is MZD. MZD is actually a definition of day we astronomers use. And y-axis is residual, which I say that difference between our model prediction and observation of when the pulses should arrive. You see that our accuracy is in the order of microsecond order. Means here are 5 pulsars we observed, and you see the anyway it is less than millisecond, 123 microsecond, few microsecond. You will say, how good is this if we compare to the international effort? As I said, our data is only for 5 years and international effort is going for less 15 years. How do we compare? Yeah, we are not as good as them, because here is the result of international effort. So you can see for some pulsar they have more than 20 years data, but some pulsars they have 15 years data, and you see their resolution is order of around 1 microsecond. So we are not yet as good as them, but we are catching up very fast, and that has become possible only because of excellent sensitivity of GMRT. GMRT is an awesome instrument. And because of that, so although we are not yet full member of this international IPTA, we have presented our result. We are associate member of IPTA, and we are planning to apply for full membership this year, means 2021. And we are going to present our work in European meeting in first week of December. And hopefully you will hear more of this experiment and probably the detection of gravitational wave very soon. And so today I will not exaggerate more. I would like to stop here today. I would just, and I will not give a very detailed long summary. I would only like to tell you that radio pulsars or rotation powers neutron stars, especially when they are in binaries, are nature's best laboratory to study gravitational physics. And okay, I here write you can even do dense matter physics, which I did not talk today, but maybe we can discuss about that another day. And for young people, it is very exciting area, because here you can do various types of work. You can do theory, observation, data analysis, simulation, computer programming, instrumentation, whatever on earth possible in academia, you can do it. Means I would say that life cannot be more fun probably other than being a pulsar astronomer. So, and especially this PTA experiment is very exciting. So I hope to talk to you about this again and again. So let me stop here today. Thank you for your attention on a nice evening.
Thank you, Manjari. So time for questions. We have 6 minutes for questions.
Manjari, I have a question. Bhaskaran.
Yeah, please.
So you mentioned about time delay, some Shapiro delay and Einstein delay at the beginning.
Yes.
So that is illustrated, for example, when the light from stars is deflected by our gravity of the sun, there are visible effects. So, can one see the delay that you are talking about by observing stars and so on during eclipse of our sun?
Actually, it is a kind of difference because means we see the pulsars are means scattered throughout our galaxy, so it is very less likely that there another star will come on the path of the signal from where it is coming. But when you think about our solar system, that time actually solar system is very compact. So although mass of the planets are very tiny in comparison of the star mass, but as it is very dense system, so the planets in solar system actually contribute to those delays. And but we know solar system ephemeris very well, so when we do the analysis, we give this input, means when the signal from the pulsar is coming, where was the location of Jupiter, Saturn, and we can actually take care of that. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, Manjari. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
This is on slide 19. You showed the residuals, and some of them were, quite away from zero. What might those be due to?
Yeah.
Some
So
unknown sources of error, I suppose.
yes. Something we call red noise. Again, what I said that the pulsars are very energetic objects, right? So they have very strong magnetic field. There are magnetic storm, earthquakes. So I mean, for one day there might be strong magnetic storm which we cannot model. So for one or two data points, if we see something they are very off, we consider okay, probably there is something going on intrinsic to the pulsar. That does not worry us. But if we see a number of, say, for 10 days there is some a point which is far from zero, that worries us. Then we see think what can be the unknown reason. And actually you are right, sometimes by doing this people discover new physics. Like there was a one pulsar which is a pulsar timing array pulsar, so that people thought it was an isolated pulsar. But after some time, they started to see a slight periodic variation that actually they found only after 20 years of analysis. Then they believe, okay, if they fit a orbit of 1,000 days, then it matches. So that now they are modeling it with that orbital period. So yes, and time to time our analysis baffles us, and we need to think what might be the causes.
And so for the topmost pulsar which you showed, there was a systematic thing on the deviation, and that doesn't worry you or make you ask what to fit in something to that. Is that?
No, because so you are saying that J1643, right?
I forgot what that was called, but the topmost one on the left, if you see, there is a trend which is all above zero. Perhaps those are all very short time. I don't know what the x-axis is, but is that a very short time?
Yes, it was all above zero, but I'm again showing it. Oh, probably I am not presenting it. But this part is only for, just let me see, for 30 days. So we are not worried about that yet. But if it continues, this trend continues for a 1 year data, then we will think that what else can be additional reason.
So why is it that 30 days, doesn't cause you to ask some questions about what might be causing it? I don't have a scale for why 30 days
Yeah,
is not significant.
because there are phenomena related to magnetic fields, magnetic storms, or see what I call neutron star. It is neutron neutron matter, and then at the surface there is normal matter crust, and there is a differential rotation between crust and core. So because of that, sometimes there is activities called glitch. Okay, so Srihari, did I answer your question?
Yes, yeah. I think you said that, like 30 days, a lot kinds of pulsar glitch phenomena might be the cause of it, which I guess we cannot model properly. So we
yes, and also means 30 days, and also the magnitude. Magnitude is in the order of microsecond. So if it was in millisecond order, that would be easier. Means that would be significant, but it is again tiny. Means we are plotting by zooming it, so it looks large, but it is in microsecond order.
So the error bars are only some kind of statistical error bars, or what? They don't include.
Yeah,
these
those are
criteria.
those are statistical. Means like say when you record your time in the observatory, we use actually that was very interesting, because before we started this experiment, there was on rubidium the atomic clock in GMRT. Then we realized that is not enough for us. So 2 years ago, they replaced that clock with a hydrogen measure. So now our error bars are. So actually, first 1.5 year, our experiment was really experiment. That data was not very good because we had to replace the clock and everything. But GMRT is supporting this experiment very large. So the clock error is one of the source of the error. Then what I said that we need the locations of the planets. There is error in that. So all these error are being taken care of our timing analysis code.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so thanks Manjari again.